Your tomato plants may be getting enough sunlight, enough water, and plenty of fertilizer, but one bad neighbor can still ruin the entire harvest. That is the part many gardeners overlook. They spend weeks choosing the right tomato variety, preparing the soil, building supports, and protecting the plants from pests. Then they place the wrong crop beside them and accidentally create competition, shade, disease pressure, or a perfect hiding place for destructive insects. At first, nothing looks wrong. Both plants may appear healthy. The leaves stay green, the stems keep growing, and flowers begin opening. But beneath the soil, the roots may be fighting for the same nutrients. Above the soil, damp, crowded leaves may be trapping moisture. A pest moving through one crop may suddenly discover that your tomatoes are only inches away. By the time the damage becomes obvious, the season may already be slipping away. In this video, I am showing you 10 crops you should never plant next to tomatoes, and what to grow nearby instead. Some of these plants are bad neighbors because they steal nutrients. Others share the same diseases. A few create completely different growing conditions that make it impossible to keep both crops healthy. Stay until the end, because number 8 is planted beside potatoes in thousands of gardens every year, even though the two crops can quietly spread the same problems back and forth all summer. Do not forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Before we begin, one important point. Companion planting is not magic. A good neighbor will not turn weak soil into perfect soil, and a bad neighbor will not always kill a tomato instantly. Spacing, climate, watering, soil health, and garden size still matter. But when you understand which plants create unnecessary problems, you can design a garden that is easier to manage and far more productive. Let us get into it. Number 1. Potatoes. Potatoes and tomatoes look like they should get along. They are related. They enjoy similar temperatures, and both grow well in rich garden soil. But that close relationship is exactly why they make such a dangerous pair. Tomatoes and potatoes belong to the nightshade family. Because they are closely related, they are vulnerable to many of the same pests and diseases. One of the biggest threats is blight. If a fungal disease begins on your potatoes, it can spread rapidly to nearby tomato plants. The same thing can happen in reverse. Planting the two crops side by side creates one large feeding and infection zone. A disease does not have to travel far. It can move through splashing water, contaminated tools, infected leaves, or drifting spores. When tomato and potato foliage is touching, the problem becomes even easier to spread. Both crops are also heavy feeders. Tomatoes need a steady supply of nutrients to build vines, flowers, and fruit. Potatoes need nutrients to grow foliage and develop tubers underground. Put them in the same small bed, and their roots begin competing for the same resources. The conflict becomes even worse because potatoes require digging. When harvest time comes, you have to disturb the soil to remove the tubers. If tomato roots are growing nearby, a garden fork or shovel can slice through them. Damaged roots weaken the plant and create openings for disease. There is another practical problem. Potatoes can remain hidden underground long after the tops die back. A small tuber left in the soil may sprout the following year. If that volunteer potato carries disease, it can expose your next tomato crop before you realize what is happening. Keep potatoes in a separate bed whenever possible. If your garden is small, use containers, grow bags, or a distant section of the yard. Avoid rotating tomatoes directly into the same space where potatoes recently suffered from disease. Grow carrots near tomatoes instead. Carrots use the soil differently. Their roots travel downward while tomato roots tend to spread through the upper soil. Carrots remain low, do not heavily shade tomato plants, and can make better use of space near the base. Just avoid packing them so tightly that airflow and access become difficult. Potatoes and tomatoes may be relatives, but in the garden, that family connection creates more risk than benefit. Number 2. Corn. Corn and tomatoes are both summer favorites. They even taste good together in salads, sauces, and fresh salsa. But in the garden, they can create several serious problems for each other. The first is shade. Corn grows tall and creates a dense wall of leaves. Tomatoes need a large amount of direct sunlight to flower well, ripen fruit, and maintain strong growth. If corn is planted on the wrong side of a tomato bed, it can block several hours of sunlight every day. The tomato plant may stretch toward the light, produce weaker stems, flower less, or ripen fruit more slowly. In cooler climates, reduced sunlight can be especially damaging because the fruit already has a limited season in which to ripen. The second problem is nutrient competition. Corn is one of the hungriest crops in the vegetable garden. It uses a large amount of nitrogen to build tall stalks and broad leaves. Tomatoes also need rich soil. When corn and tomatoes share a small area, both plants may begin pulling from the same nutrient supply. Unless the soil is extremely fertile and carefully managed, one or both crops can underperform. Then there is the pest problem. Corn and tomatoes can attract closely related or shared pests. A caterpillar feeding on corn may also damage tomato fruit. Growing both crops together creates a larger target and gives pests multiple food sources in one place. Corn also reduces airflow when planted densely. A block of corn can create a warm, sheltered pocket around nearby tomato plants. If the tomato foliage stays damp and air cannot circulate properly, fungal diseases gain an advantage. If you want to grow corn, give it its own block. Corn pollinates better when planted in several short rows rather than one narrow line, so it already benefits from a separate, dedicated space. Place the corn where it will not shade your tomatoes during the middle of the day. Grow sunflowers nearby instead, but position them carefully. Sunflowers still grow tall, so they should usually be placed where their shadow falls away from the tomato plants. They attract pollinators, support beneficial insects, and add vertical interest without needing to be packed into a dense block. A tall plant is not automatically a bad companion. The problem begins when height, hunger, and pest pressure all appear at the same time. Corn brings all three. Number 3. Cabbage and tomatoes demand too much from the same patch of soil. Cabbage belongs to the Brassica family, which also includes broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and Brussels sprouts. These crops need plenty of nutrients and water to develop large leaves and firm heads. Tomatoes are also heavy feeders. When cabbage is planted next to tomatoes, the two crops begin competing for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, moisture, and root space. At first, you may not see the competition. Both plants can remain green for a while, but as they grow, their demands increase. The cabbage begins forming a head while the tomato starts flowering and setting fruit. That is when the soil is placed under the most pressure. A tomato plant that cannot access enough nutrients may produce fewer flowers, smaller fruit, pale leaves, or weak new growth. The cabbage may also remain small and fail to form a proper head. Both crops lose. Cabbage creates another problem above the soil. Its wide leaves spread outward and can crowd the lower portion of a tomato plant. That reduces airflow and makes it harder to water, inspect, mulch, and remove diseased leaves. Crowded growth can also trap moisture after rain. If tomato leaves stay damp for too long, fungal spores have more time to germinate and spread. Cabbage pests may not always attack tomatoes directly, but they increase the total pest activity around the bed. Caterpillars, beetles, aphids, and other insects can gather in the same crowded area. The more difficult the bed becomes to inspect, the more easily a problem can hide. The crops also prefer different seasonal conditions. Cabbage performs best in cooler weather. Tomatoes want warmth. Trying to push both crops through the same summer conditions usually leaves one stressed. In very mild climates, gardeners may grow cabbage during a cool part of the season and tomatoes later. But that is succession planting, not planting them side by side at the same time. Grow lettuce near tomatoes instead. Lettuce has shallow roots, remains compact, and uses fewer nutrients. It can benefit from the light shade cast by taller tomato plants when summer weather becomes hot. The tomato helps protect the lettuce from intense afternoon sun, while the lettuce covers part of the soil and uses space that might otherwise remain empty. That is a much more cooperative arrangement. Number 4. Broccoli creates many of the same problems as cabbage, but it deserves its own place on this list, because gardeners often try to fit it beneath taller crops. The idea sounds efficient. Broccoli grows low. Tomatoes grow upward. So why not place the broccoli underneath and use two different levels of the garden? The problem is that the real competition happens underground. Broccoli develops a strong root system and requires plenty of nutrients. Tomatoes also spread roots through the bed and need consistent feeding throughout the growing season. The plants may occupy different heights, but they are still pulling from the same soil. Broccoli also needs reliable moisture to form a good head. Tomatoes need steady moisture too, but the amount and timing may not always match. If the bed is kept too wet for the broccoli, tomato roots may suffer. If it dries too much, the broccoli may become stressed and produce a small or bitter head. Then there is temperature. Broccoli prefers cool conditions. Hot weather can cause it to bolt, become bitter, or stop forming a proper head. Tomatoes need warmth to thrive. By the time tomato plants are entering their strongest growth period, broccoli is often approaching the part of the season it dislikes most. That means the gardener is trying to keep two crops happy under opposite conditions. Broccoli leaves can also become large and dense. They block access to the lower tomato stem and create another place for moisture and pests to hide. Aphids often gather beneath broccoli leaves. Caterpillars may chew through the foliage. Even though those pests may not immediately move onto tomatoes, the added insect activity complicates the bed. Grow basil near tomatoes instead. Basil enjoys warm weather, fits into smaller spaces, and does not create the same heavy competition as broccoli. It also makes sense from a maintenance point of view. Basil and tomatoes need similar watering conditions. Both prefer sun and warm soil. You can harvest basil repeatedly without disturbing the tomato roots. The flowers attract pollinators and small beneficial insects if you allow some branches to bloom. Just remember that basil still needs room. Do not pack it tightly against the tomato stem. Leave enough space for airflow and access. Good companion planting is not about squeezing plants into every empty inch. It is about choosing neighbors that can share the same conditions without constantly fighting. Number 5. Fennel. Fennel is one of the most difficult plants to place in a mixed vegetable garden. It is attractive, useful, and excellent for pollinators when it flowers. But it does not behave like a friendly neighbor. Fennel can release natural compounds that interfere with the growth of nearby plants. This effect is often described as allelopathy. In simple terms, the plant can influence the surrounding soil in a way that makes life harder for its neighbors. Tomatoes may respond with weaker growth, reduced vigor, or disappointing production. The damage is not always dramatic enough to identify immediately. That is what makes fennel so frustrating. A tomato plant may remain alive but never reach its potential. The gardener may blame the seed, the fertilizer, the weather, or the soil, without realizing the fennel is part of the problem. Fennel also grows larger than many people expect. The feathery foliage may look light and delicate, but the plant can become tall, broad, and strongly rooted. It can shade smaller plants and occupy valuable space around the tomato bed. Once fennel flowers, it attracts many insects. Most of that activity can be beneficial because parasitic wasps, hoverflies, bees, and other useful insects visit the flowers. But the plant is still better placed at a distance. You can use fennel as an insectary plant near the edge of the garden rather than inside the tomato bed. That allows you to enjoy its benefits without forcing the roots to share the same space. Grow chives near tomatoes instead. Chives remain compact, require little room, and produce flowers that attract pollinators. Their onion-like scent may help confuse or discourage certain pests, although they should not be treated as complete protection. They are also perennial in many climates. Plant them once, and they can return year after year. Chives do not demand the same amount of nutrients as fennel, and their upright leaves are less likely to smother the lower part of a tomato plant. Fennel is not a bad plant. It is simply a plant that prefers independence. Give it its own container, a separate herb bed, or a distant sunny corner. Your tomatoes will be better for it. Number 6. Cauliflower. Cauliflower is one of the most demanding vegetables in the garden. It needs cool temperatures, fertile soil, consistent moisture, and protection from stress. Tomatoes want heat, strong sunlight, and a long warm season. Trying to grow both crops together is like trying to create two different climates in the same bed. Cauliflower belongs to the Brassica family and uses a large amount of nutrients to produce its central head. Tomatoes need those same nutrients to build flowers and fruit. When both crops grow side by side, their roots compete intensely. This competition may not be a problem when the plants are small. But as the cauliflower head begins developing and the tomato starts carrying fruit, demand rises sharply. If the soil cannot support both, growth slows. Cauliflower may produce a tiny head or no proper head at all. Tomatoes may show yellowing leaves, weak fruit set, or smaller fruit. The gardener often responds by adding more fertilizer. That can create another problem. Too much nitrogen may produce excessive tomato leaves and delay fruiting. It can also make some plants more vulnerable to soft growth and pest damage. The original problem was poor plant pairing, but the attempted solution creates a second issue. Cauliflower also takes up physical space. Its broad leaves spread outward cover the soil and crowd the lower tomato foliage. The dense overlap traps humidity and blocks airflow. Because cauliflower prefers cooler conditions, gardeners sometimes water it heavily or try to shade it. Those choices may not suit the tomato plant beside it. Grow marigolds near tomatoes instead. Marigolds are compact, colorful, and easy to fit around the edges of a tomato bed. Their flowers attract pollinators and beneficial insects. Certain marigold varieties may also help reduce some soil nematode problems when used properly, although simply placing one flower beside a tomato is not a guaranteed cure. The greatest benefit is diversity. A flowering plant brings different insects into the garden, occupies less root space than cauliflower, and does not compete as aggressively for nutrients. Choose a manageable variety and avoid letting the flowers become so dense that they block access to the tomato stem. A companion should make the bed easier to manage, not harder. Number 7. Eggplant. Eggplants and tomatoes are another pair that seem compatible because they enjoy similar weather. Both love heat, both need sun, both belong to the nightshade family. And once again, that family connection creates the problem. Eggplants and tomatoes attract many of the same pests: aphids, flea beetles, hornworms, whiteflies, spider mites, and other insects may feed on both crops. When the plants are side by side, a pest that finishes with one has only a short distance to travel before finding the other. This concentrates the damage. Instead of facing a small infestation on one crop, you may end up with a growing population feeding on an entire section of related plants. They also share diseases. Fungal, bacterial, and viral problems may spread more easily when susceptible plants are packed together. If one crop becomes infected, the neighboring crop is already exposed. Eggplant foliage can become wide and dense. A healthy eggplant may shade the lower portion of a tomato plant and reduce air movement between them. The two crops may also become tangled, making inspection difficult. That is dangerous because early pest detection is one of the best ways to prevent serious damage. If you cannot easily see beneath the leaves, pests gain time to reproduce. Eggplants and tomatoes are both hungry plants. They need rich soil and consistent moisture to produce well. In a crowded bed, nutrient competition may reduce the harvest from both. This does not mean they must be grown on opposite sides of a large property. In some gardens, a reasonable distance and good spacing may be enough. The goal is to avoid creating one dense nightshade block where every pest and disease can move freely. Use separate rows, beds, or containers when possible. Grow parsley near tomatoes instead. Parsley stays relatively compact and attracts hoverflies and other beneficial insects when it flowers. Hoverfly larvae feed on aphids, which can help reduce pest pressure naturally. Parsley also tolerates some light shade from tomatoes and does not compete as aggressively as eggplant. Harvesting it does not require digging deeply or disturbing tomato roots. Tomatoes and eggplants may enjoy the same weather, but similarity is not always a benefit. Sometimes it means they share the same weaknesses. Number 8. Peppers are planted beside tomatoes constantly. They appear together in raised beds, containers, greenhouse rows, and backyard plots. Both crops want warm soil, full sun, and similar watering. That makes the pairing convenient. But convenience does not remove the risk. Peppers and tomatoes belong to the nightshade family, so they share several diseases and pests. A disease that begins on a pepper plant can spread to nearby tomatoes. Bacterial spots, fungal infections, and certain viruses may affect both crops. When the plants are crowded together, splashing water and touching leaves make movement easier. They also attract many of the same insects. Aphids, whiteflies, spider mites, flea beetles, and hornworms may use both crops. If the plants are mixed closely, the pest population can spread throughout the bed without needing to search for another host. This is especially dangerous in greenhouses and enclosed gardens, where air movement is limited and pests reproduce quickly. Peppers and tomatoes also compete for nutrients. Both need strong root systems and reliable fertility. Tomatoes often grow faster and larger, which means they may shade peppers and dominate the soil around them. A pepper plant that receives less sunlight may remain small and produce fewer fruits. The risk becomes worse when gardeners place several peppers around the base of one tomato plant, believing they are using space efficiently. By midsummer, the tomato canopy expands. The pepper plants disappear beneath it and airflow drops. That does not mean peppers and tomatoes can never exist in the same garden. In a large, well-spaced bed with excellent airflow, healthy soil, and careful disease management, both crops may perform well. But they should not be pressed tightly together. If you grow them in the same general area, allow generous spacing. Avoid overhead watering, clean your tools, and inspect both crops regularly. For the safest setup, use separate beds or rows. Grow carrots near tomatoes instead. Carrots remain low, use vertical soil space, and are less likely to spread the same diseases. They can fit along the edges of the tomato bed without creating a tall wall of foliage. Just remember that tomato roots can still compete with carrots if they are planted too densely. Thin the carrots properly and avoid digging aggressively near the tomato base. The lesson is not that peppers are enemies. The lesson is that crops with the same needs often have the same vulnerabilities. Number 9. Mature dill. Young dill can be useful near a vegetable garden. Its leaves are light, its roots are not extremely aggressive, and its flowers attract many beneficial insects. But mature dill is a different neighbor. As the plant grows tall and begins flowering, it can create several problems around tomatoes. The first is physical competition. Mature dill becomes larger and more branching than the small herb seedlings sold at nurseries. It can lean into tomato plants, block airflow, and cast shade over lower leaves. The second is timing. Dill flowers attract beneficial insects, but the plant may also attract caterpillars that feed on related plants. Some of those caterpillars become beautiful butterflies, so whether they are treated as pests depends on your goals. The bigger concern is that mature dill may interfere with the growth of nearby tomatoes. Gardeners often report that dill becomes less friendly as it reaches maturity and begins setting seed. Rather than risking a weak tomato plant, keep mature dill at a reasonable distance. You can still use it as an insectary plant along the garden border. Allow it to flower where hoverflies, parasitic wasps, ladybugs, and other beneficial insects can find it without the roots and stems crowding your tomatoes. You can also harvest dill regularly before it becomes large. Use the leaves in the kitchen. Remove the plant before seed production, or succession plant small batches in a separate herb area. Grow cilantro near tomatoes instead. Cilantro flowers are excellent for attracting tiny beneficial insects. The plant remains manageable for a while, and you can harvest the leaves before allowing some plants to bloom. In hot weather, cilantro bolts quickly. That sounds like a problem, but for insect support, flowering can be useful. Just keep enough space so that the cilantro does not become a thick, damp mat around the tomato stem. Herbs are often described as perfect companions for everything. That is too simple. The growth stage matters. A small dill plant and a mature flowering dill plant do not occupy the same amount of space or behave in the same way. Number 10. Rosemary. Rosemary is a wonderful herb. It is fragrant, drought-tolerant, attractive to pollinators, and useful in the kitchen. But it wants almost the opposite growing conditions from tomatoes. Rosemary evolved in dry Mediterranean conditions. It prefers lean soil, excellent drainage, plenty of sun, and relatively little water once established. Its roots hate sitting in constantly wet soil. Tomatoes are thirsty, hungry plants. They need fertile soil, regular feeding, and steady moisture to develop a heavy crop. Trying to keep both plants happy in the same bed creates a constant conflict. If you water enough for the tomatoes, the rosemary may remain too wet and develop root problems. If you keep the bed dry enough for rosemary, the tomatoes may wilt, drop flowers, crack fruit, or develop blossom end rot because of inconsistent moisture. The soil creates another conflict. Rich compost and fertilizers support tomato growth. Rosemary often becomes softer, weaker, and less aromatic in soil that is too rich. The plant may grow quickly but lose the tough structure that helps it resist stress. Mulch can create trouble too. Tomatoes benefit from organic mulch that holds moisture around the roots. Rosemary prefers a dry crown and fast drainage. Thick, damp mulch pressed around rosemary stems may encourage rot. Even the harvest pattern is different. Tomatoes are annual crops in most climates and are removed after the season. Rosemary is a long-lived perennial in suitable climates. Repeatedly digging and replanting tomatoes beside an established rosemary shrub can disturb its roots. Keep rosemary in a separate herb bed, gravel garden, raised dry area, or container. That allows you to control its watering and soil without compromising the tomatoes. Grow basil near tomatoes instead. Basil enjoys the same warmth and more closely matches the moisture needs of tomatoes. It responds well to fertile soil and regular harvesting. You can place it near the edge of the bed, prune it often, and remove it at the end of the season without disturbing a permanent shrub. Rosemary is not a bad companion because it harms tomatoes directly. It is a bad companion because the two plants ask the gardener for opposite things. No watering schedule can satisfy both perfectly in the same small root zone. What to plant near tomatoes instead? Now that you know the 10 crops to keep away, let us look at better choices. Basil is one of the easiest. It enjoys warm weather, can be harvested repeatedly, and fits into small gaps without creating heavy shade. Keep it pruned so it branches rather than growing tall and thin. Marigolds add flowers and insect diversity. They attract pollinators and beneficial insects, and they remain manageable when you choose compact varieties. Carrots use deeper soil space and stay low. They can grow along bed edges without blocking sunlight, although they still need enough room to develop properly. Lettuce works well early in the season, or in climates where summer is not too hot. The tomato canopy can provide partial shade and help delay bolting. Parsley and cilantro attract helpful insects when allowed to flower. They also give you an edible harvest while using relatively little space. Chives remain compact and return year after year in many climates. Their flowers attract pollinators, and their narrow leaves do not create a dense canopy. Nasturtiums can spread around the edge of the bed and attract pollinators. They may also draw certain pests away from other crops, although they should still be monitored so they do not become heavily infested. Borage produces blue flowers that bees love. It can become large, so place it where it will not shade or crowd the tomatoes. The best companion is not always the plant with the most impressive claim. It is the plant that fits your soil, climate, spacing, and watering system without making the tomato bed harder to manage. The spacing mistake that makes every companion worse. Even a good companion can become a bad neighbor when planted too close. Tomato plants need access to light and air. The lower leaves should not remain buried beneath herbs, flowers, or vegetables. You need enough room to inspect the stem, water the root zone, add mulch, tie branches, and remove diseased foliage. If you cannot reach the base of the plant, the bed is too crowded. Crowding also makes pests difficult to see. A hornworm can hide beneath overlapping foliage. Aphids can multiply on shaded new growth. Fungal spots can spread unnoticed on leaves pressed against another plant. Leave space around every tomato according to its mature size. Determinate tomatoes usually remain more compact, while indeterminate varieties continue growing and may need large cages, stakes, or trellises. Do not judge spacing by the size of the seedling. Picture the plant in midsummer. That small transplant may become several feet wide. A companion plant should use leftover space, not steal the space the tomato will eventually need. Final recap. Let us go through the 10 crops one more time. Keep potatoes away because they share diseases, pests, nutrients, and root space with tomatoes. Keep corn away because it creates shade, heavy nutrient competition, and shared pest pressure. Keep cabbage away because it is a hungry brassica that crowds the lower tomato canopy. Keep broccoli away because it competes underground and prefers cooler growing conditions. Keep fennel away because it can interfere with nearby plant growth and becomes large. Keep cauliflower away because it demands nutrients, moisture, space, and cool weather. Keep eggplant away because it shares pests and diseases with tomatoes. Keep peppers from being planted too closely because their shared nightshade weaknesses allow problems to spread quickly. Keep mature dill at a distance because its size and growth stage can make it an unfriendly neighbor. And keep rosemary separate because it needs dry, lean soil, while tomatoes need rich, consistently moist conditions. Your garden does not need complicated companion planting charts. It needs common sense. Do the plants want the same amount of water? Will one block sunlight from the other? Are both heavy feeders? Do they share the same diseases and pests? Will you still be able to reach, inspect, and harvest each plant in midsummer? Those 5 questions will help you avoid most bad combinations. Tomatoes perform best when they have room to breathe, reliable moisture, healthy soil, and neighbors that do not create extra competition. Choose companions that stay manageable. Give every plant enough space. And remember that the goal is not to fill every inch of soil. The goal is to create a garden where every crop has a fair chance to produce. If this video helped you avoid a costly planting mistake, hit the like button and share it with another gardener growing tomatoes this season. Subscribe for more practical gardening advice that helps you grow healthier plants without wasting time, money, or space. And leave a comment telling me what you are currently growing beside your tomatoes. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.